召喚。やばい。
Everything begins with our useless high school gamer named Alan, who has spent almost his entire life playing games and watching animes like me. He had already finished his favorite game 3 years ago, yet he was still deeply annoyed that it ended so soon, complaining. He told himself that the game was actually trash and pointless and far too short, yet he was already searching for a new challenge that could keep him occupied for a whole decade. It seemed like he had no real life outside of his monitor, and he scoured the internet for the most difficult experience possible until, suddenly, his screen flickered and a mysterious website appeared. The site promised a game that would never end, set in a vast fantasy world of magic and steel, but the most intriguing part was the choice of difficulty levels. He scrolled past the easy and hard settings until he reached the Hell level, which came with a dark warning that choosing it would lead to a life of absolute misery. Instead of being afraid, he felt a rush of excitement because he had never seen a game be so blunt, and he pushed the button to start his descent into chaos. When the character selection screen popped up, he saw powerful roles like knights and heroes, but his eyes were drawn to a unique class called the Summoner, which was ranked even higher than the Demon King himself. Without really understanding the mess he was getting into, he picked the 8-star Summoner role, eager to waste more of his life in this digital world. In that instant, his surroundings blurred and he vanished from his seat, only to wake up gasping for air in the middle of a deep, dark ocean. He felt like he was drowning and screamed for help, but then a glowing blue orb appeared out of nowhere and swallowed him whole. Everything changed when he opened his eyes again and realized he had been reborn into the body of a tiny, crying newborn baby. His new father picked him up like a little piece of raw meat, looking incredibly proud, but the baby could only think about how embarrassing it was to be handled this way. The father decided to name him Alan after a great ancestor, and as the months passed, Alan realized that being a baby wasn't so bad because he got to eat and sleep for free while people served him. He remembered his past life as Kureichi, a 35-year-old broken jobless failure, and he felt like he had been given a lucky second chance at happiness. Even though he couldn't speak to his parents yet, his mind was still sharp with all his adult memories, and he watched his mother, Trish, who joked that his huge appetite would leave them with nothing left to eat. His father, Rodan, was a strong woodsman and a former knight who was surprisingly young, and his mother was a beautiful woman of only 16. They lived in a poor, remote farmhouse far from the city, yet they still had to pay heavy taxes to the local ruler. Alan pretended to be a sleepy, good boy to make his parents leave the room, but the moment they closed the door, he jumped up to test his summoning powers. He tried and failed over and over until he was ready to give up, and then, suddenly, a magical skill book materialized right in front of him. He let out a loud shout of joy that brought his parents running back, but he quickly hid the book and pretended to be talking in his sleep. Once he was alone again, he studied the book and saw that his experience was still at 0, but he discovered he could summon monsters and insects to do his bidding. On the very last page, he found a note from the game developer apologizing for the late delivery and admitting the game was full of bugs they were still trying to fix. Alan regretted not picking the Demon King role for an easier life, but he decided to try summoning a simple insect anyway. He learned that he had to visualize the creature clearly, and soon he pulled out a card for a level 1 grasshopper while trying to stay quiet so no one would hear. The next day, while his father was out chopping wood and his mother was busy with the laundry, Alan pulled out the card and a bright blue light filled the room. A giant, strange-looking grasshopper appeared and immediately hopped right into his face. But it wouldn't follow his orders because it was a mindless, brainless bug. He opened his skill book to give it a name so it would obey him, calling it Dink, and he felt his agility skill go up by 1 level. Still, the peace didn't last long because his mother walked in, saw the giant bug near her baby, and screamed as she crushed the poor summon under her foot. Alan spent the rest of the week stubbornly practicing his new craft, and by the end of it, he finally managed to summon a tiny little mouse. Alan didn't let the loss of his first summon discourage him, and he soon tried again, bringing a small mouse named Roxy into the world. He expected the mouse to be as mindless as the grasshopper, yet he was pleasantly surprised to find that Roxy was incredibly obedient and possessed a high-speed dash skill that sent him racing around the room like a tiny blur. Through this, Alan realized he could control a vast variety of creatures, each with unique ranks and powers, and his own attack stats even boosted to 10 points, making him strong enough to chop wood despite being a mere toddler. His parents were stunned by his unnatural strength, but Alan knew that in this hell difficulty, 10 points was nothing compared to the hundreds he would eventually need. One evening, his father Rodan returned home covered in blood, and although Trish panicked, he quickly reassured her that it was only the blood of a giant wild boar he had hunted. Alan was a bit disappointed, thinking his father had taken down a lion or something more legendary, but he was still eager to see a real monster instead of the small creatures he had been summoning in secret. As they walked to the village to see the beast, Alan stepped outside for the first time in this life, feeling overwhelmed by the beauty of the world and the sight of the alba birds flying north. His father explained that he named Alan after a young bird because he wanted him to be a free adventurer, even though Trish had originally hated the idea of naming her son after a little monster. When they arrived, Alan saw the massive boar being butchered by 3 men and realized his father hadn't been exaggerating at all. The creature was a beast that usually required 20 strong men to defeat. Rodan's friend, a hulking man named Gerard, greeted them and introduced his own daughter, Kana, who was the same age as Alan but much more energetic. Over the next 10 months, Alan's dedication paid off as he reached level 2, doubling his card storage and gaining the ability to summon 2 creatures at once while even recording his thoughts directly into his magic book. He spent his nights grinding for mana, and by the time he turned 3, he had mastered the art of merging summons, creating a talking bird named Chappie and a powerful digger named Bosky, who could create massive pitfall traps in seconds. However, life wasn't just about magic. He had to train with Kana, who had grown into a terrifyingly fast and strong sparring partner. She fought with such ferocity that Alan could barely catch his breath, and she eventually shattered his wooden sword, winning their duel before heading to his house to play. Around this time, Trish became pregnant again, and Alan, feeling a sudden surge of adult responsibility, offered to help his father with the heavy farm work to ease his mother's burden. His parents were touched by his maturity, and though they told him children should just play, Rodan was clearly proud of his son's hardworking spirit. Alan kept his secret training hidden, telling his parents he was just practicing throwing stones at trees to protect his mother from danger, which made his father beam with pride. Trish even teased him about protecting Kana too, calling her his future wife, though Alan knew Kana was already stronger than him. As the winter snow began to fall, the family prepared for the appraisal ceremony that happens when a child turns 5, a vital ritual that determines a person's talent and social rank. Suddenly, the peaceful waiting was cut short when Trish collapsed in pain, and the house became a frantic scene of boiling water and whispered prayers as she went into labor. Alan watched the chaos, realizing the game of life was getting serious, and after a long night, a new baby brother named Mash was born into the family. Seeing his tiny brother made Alan feel more alive than he ever had in his previous world, and he vowed to be the one to break his family's cycle of poverty. Soon, the day of the ceremony arrived, and Alan traveled to the city with Rodan, Gerard, and a screaming, excited Kana. The city was unlike anything he had seen, with tall buildings and crowds of children from nearby villages, all hoping for a high-ranking talent. As they stood near the church, Alan noticed the clear divide between the wealthy children in clean clothes and commoners like himself, even overhearing some city folk mocking his black hair and country roots. But everything went silent as the church doors swung open, and 3 priests stepped out, announcing that today was the day a lucky few would discover a talent that could change their destiny forever. The priests' words hit Alan like a punch to the gut when he realized that the legendary hero, Clyus, the current sword saint, had also been born a commoner, a descendant of slaves just like him. It suddenly clicked that the brutal conditions of this hell mode weren't just for show. The game forced players to start from the absolute bottom to build their character through genuine struggle, a rule that applied to everyone, not just him. Inside the appraisal hall, 3 majestic statues loomed over the crowd, representing the kingdom's first heroes, with the strongest one standing proudly in the center. The ceremony began, and of course, the village chief's son, Bello, was called up first, proving that even here, status mattered more than fairness. Bello approached the crystal ball trembling with fear, but the moment he touched it, his stats flashed onto the black slate behind him, revealing a talent for commerce. His father erupted in joy, hugging the boy as if he had just saved the world. But Alan watched with confusion, unable to understand why anyone would be so thrilled about a non-combat skill in a world full of monsters. Alan's own skill book suddenly appeared before his eyes, showing him that unlike the public slate which used vague descriptions, his private interface displayed precise numerical stats, a secret advantage no one else could see. The ceremony continued, and the mood shifted when another boy touched the crystal, only to be told he had no talent at all, sending him running back to his father in tears. Then, a fierce-looking boy named Dogo stepped up and confidently slammed his hand on the ball, revealing an A-rank talent for axe fighting, which made his father roar with pride about rising above their slave status. Alan wasn't impressed, knowing his own potential was far beyond that, but his attention snapped to Kana as her turn finally came. She rushed forward and touched the crystal, and instantly, a blinding light exploded from the orb, terrifying the crowd who thought it might shatter. The priests went into a frenzy, their eyes wide with disbelief, while Gerard panicked, begging them to tell him what was wrong with his daughter. But the head priest looked at him with awe and announced that Kana was a miracle. She possessed the talent of the Sword Saint, a rank reserved for the strongest warriors in history. The hall gasped, unable to believe a future legend was living among them in a poor village. And while Gerard beamed with overwhelming pride, Kana just looked disappointed because she didn't understand what a Sword Saint was and just wanted to be a normal knight. Alan, however, was thrilled for her, finally understanding where her endless energy and strength came from. Then, the priest called Alan's name. He walked up to the crystal, his heart pounding with the fear that his secret class, necromancer, would be exposed to his father. He touched the cold surface and the light flickered weakly, making him think it was broken, until suddenly, a beam of light shot out even more intense than Kaina's, knocking him flat on his back. His father rushed to his side, but the priest stared at the slate in confusion, and then delivered the crushing news. Alan had no talent. The words hung in the air, and Alan couldn't believe his ears, cursing the game developers for this glitch and wondering if his summoner class was just too rare to be recognized by their primitive tools. To make matters worse, Rodan looked devastated, and they walked home in silence, greeted by Trish and Little Mash at the door. Rodan tried to put on a brave face, saying he was proud of Alan regardless, but inside, Alan was heartbroken because his dream of lifting his family out of poverty had just been smashed. That night, he stayed awake, analyzing his cards, and realized that the Hell mode and his unique class were likely the reasons for his no talent result. The system simply couldn't measure his potential because he was an anomaly. Determined to prove them all wrong, he vowed to grind until he became the strongest player in this world. The next day, the atmosphere was tense as they visited Gerard's house to celebrate Kaina's success. Matilda, Kaina's mother, welcomed them, but Rodan and Gerard were already arguing, with Rodan refusing a celebratory drink out of jealousy and fear for Kaina's future. The argument escalated until they were grabbing each other's collars, shouting about how Kaina would be taken away by the army, while Alan watched and wished they would just shut up and think about his future for once. Kaina was about to step in and hit them, but Matilda beat her to it, punching Gerard in the face to shut him up, which terrified Alan into thinking marriage in this world was a dangerous trap. The two men eventually calmed down, admitting they were just worried like brothers, and they finally shared the expensive drink sent by the village chief. The next morning, knights from the capital arrived to verify the new sword saint, and everyone was shocked to see a tiny girl step forward. Dogo, the axe boy, tried to bully Alan again, but Kaina stepped in to defend him just as the knight commander, Zen, the current sword saint, arrived. Zen was skeptical that a little girl could be his successor and demanded a duel to prove it, threatening to execute her family if they were lying. Gerard begged for mercy, but Zen was ruthless, forcing Kaina to pick up a real steel sword and fight his vice commander, Librad. To everyone's horror, Kaina didn't just hold the sword. She attacked with terrifying speed and skill, pushing the grown knight back with a flurry of strikes. Librad tried to kick her away, sending her flying into a wall, but Kaina got right back up, her eyes burning with power, and she unleashed a ferocious assault that shattered Librad's sword and won the duel. The crowd erupted, and Zen, realizing he had been wrong, humbled himself before Gerard and offered to take Kaina under his wing when she turned 12. He then invited everyone to a feast, where he noticed Alan staring at the fruit and learned he was Rodan's son. Zen was starstruck, revealing that Rodan was famous even among nobles for his ability to hunt giant boars, which made Alan realize his father was a local legend. As they went home, both Alan and Rodan pulled out stolen fruits from their pockets for Trish and Mash, proving that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. 2 years passed, and Alan, now 7, was ecstatic to see his summoning skill hit level 2, unlocking a powerful new card, the magical dark dragon named Shinigami. His mana and card slots had doubled, and he felt stronger than ever. Back at home, Trish was pregnant again, and the family was buzzing with the feeling that it would be a girl this time. Alan suggested the name Maya after checking his stat book for ideas, and though Rodan found it strange compared to his monster names, the family loved it. Alan noticed his father's arm had healed quickly from a recent boar hunt, and realized that while Rodan lacked high mana, his physical resilience was monstrous, inspiring Alan to train even harder to catch up to the man who was his hero. Alan was frustrated that as a level 1 player, he couldn't gain any experience without fighting real monsters, but he knew that in this world, children weren't allowed to leave the safety of the village. He begged his father to take him along on a hunt, and yet Rodan refused without a second thought, telling him that the woods were far too dangerous for a toddler to treat like a playground. Alan grumbled while washing dishes, but that night, a glowing message from the developers appeared in his book. They apologized for the technical delays caused by his hell difficulty and unlocked a new notification system to track his skills. He looked through his menu and saw a list of powerful abilities, realizing that while Kaina was a master of the sword, his path to power lay in the complex art of summoning. He decided to experiment by merging 3 cards at once, creating a level 3 version of the insect Dinka that glowed with a strange light. Still, his mother walked in and instantly crushed the poor creature under her foot before he could even test it. The next morning, as he hung the laundry to dry, Alan tried one last combination from his book, praying for something useful, and suddenly, a card appeared featuring a talking apple with tiny arms and legs. This strange being, which he named Boo, was a level 5 creature that didn't fight with claws or teeth, but instead transformed into a tall, fragrant plant that filled the air with a heavenly scent. Trish found the plant and loved the smell so much she decided to grow it behind the house, unaware that it was actually one of Alan's magical summons. Despite his progress, Alan still couldn't win a single sparring match against Kaina, who knocked him to the ground every time, yet he noticed his sword skills were quietly rising to level 3. He spent his free time throwing stones stones at trees, over 20,000 of them over the years, while also helping his pregnant mother and his little brother Mash to ease the burden of their difficult life. One evening, the peace was shattered when Gerard and a group of men arrived at the door, carrying a bloodied and unconscious Rodin on a wooden stretcher. A giant boar had gored him during the hunt, and the men had been forced to sear the wound with fire to stop the bleeding. They had used an expensive healing herb called a rose flower to save his life, which Gerard had bought using the gold Zen had given him, proving that he was a true friend in their darkest hour. Alan listened from the shadows and learned that the village chief had pressured Rodin into training arrogant city men who didn't respect the dangers of the forest. One of these cowards had panicked during the hunt, and Rodin had stepped in to take the hit that would have killed the man, sacrificing his own safety for a fool. When Rodin finally woke up, Alan felt a heavy wave of guilt, realizing that this world wasn't a game and that his parents were real people risking their lives every day to survive. He vowed to stop acting like a helpless child and began using his monstrous strength to help Gerard with the harvest, pulling giant roots out of the ground with one hand and shocking everyone with his power. Even when the man Rodin saved came to apologize with gifts of fruit, Alan couldn't help but feel angry at the man's stupidity, yet he marveled at his father's noble heart. As autumn turned to winter, Alan decided he needed to hunt for real food to help his healing father, so he set a trap in the fields using his summoned frogs as bait. He waited patiently behind a tree hoping for a small bird, but suddenly a massive prehistoric-looking eagle swooped down, its talons ready to kill. The creature was far stronger than anything Alan had faced, and as his small summons were wiped out one by one, he realized he was out of mana and trapped. The giant bird pinned him to the ground, its sharp beak hovering over his face, and in that terrifying moment, Alan realized he was staring death in the eyes. And why that this anime new episode comes to the end, so friend, if you want next episodes, so now like the video and leave comment for next episode.